Hello team, welcome to another ATP geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. Ukraine war breaking news update. I think this is important enough to talk to you about. I was looking on my phone just as I was getting ready for bed and thought, I've got to talk about this because it has to get out there. And I just wanted to get the record for most amount of videos ever released in a day by a single human being. Obviously I'm going to get nowhere near that. But what is happening? Well, this is worthy of talk because this is all that has been consuming my brain for the last however long, which is that aid package in Congress. I'm so obsessed with the Ukraine war, with the right thing happening, and with Ukraine getting as much help as they can get, that this one thing has frustrated me more than anything, as I'm sure you have understood over the last however many, 5 months in waiting now. There appears to be a discharge petition. There appears to be two discharge petitions going around the Congress at the moment. And that is really good news. First of all, let's talk about what a discharge petition is. So in the House, I know not everyone is American who watches this, so let's go back to basics. You have two elements to Congress. You've got the Senate, which is 100 senators, 2 senators from each of the 50 states. Despite how big the states are, population-wise and geographically, you get 2 senators. And that's your kind of upper house, and they vote on stuff. And then you've got the House of Representatives that has, goodness me, what is it at the moment? 430, whatever. Members of the House of Representatives. These lawmakers they only serve a 2-year term, and the senators serve 6-year terms. It's quite different style of governing in the sense that different things will interest them. You're always campaigning if you're on a 2-year cycle. You're not always campaigning if you're in a 6-year cycle, so you can concentrate on foreign policy stuff and bigger ideas in governance. Whereas if you're a member of the House of Representatives, you are just thinking about what's going to please your local constituents. Okay. So we've had this impasse in Congress where Senate passed this bill for aid to Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel, and that it had passed 70 to 29, and that's just a really resounding majority, effectively. And it's passed to the House of Representatives to then deal with. But the majority speaker for the Republicans, who have a slim majority in the House of Representatives, decided not to even put the bill to the floor. And so there's this weird thing where he has almost singular power to decide whether something gets voted on or not. In other words, it's almost in some weird way dictatorial. There's a lot of power in what Speaker Mike Johnson is able to do or not to do. So there's a way around this that's called the discharge petition, and correct me if I'm wrong. I am not American, obviously, but in the House, the Speaker typically, and this is from Yahoo News, works with the leaders to set the agenda and decides which bills or resolutions will or won't get a vote. Most legislation originates in committees, which then vote to send bills to the floor for final approval. But lawmakers can discharge legislation that's been sitting in committee if 218 members, a majority of the lower chamber, sign a petition to do so, effectively bypassing the Speaker to bring a bill before the House for a vote. Quote, discharge is generally the only procedure by which members can secure consideration of a measure without cooperation from the Committee of Referral or the majority party leadership and the Committee on Rules, a Congressional Research Service report from 2023 said. Quote, for this reason, discharge is designed to be difficult to accomplish and has rarely been used successfully. In fact, I think it's only been successful in something like 20 out of 221 attempts, right? So this is rarely successful. A House rule dating back to 1931 outlines the process. Any member can file a discharge petition with the House clerk, who then makes it available in a convenient place for members to sign. A waiting period of 7 legislative days kicks off once the petition gains the signatures of a majority of the chamber. After that, a member who has signed the petition can notify leadership that they'll bring the discharge motion on the floor. The Speaker must then designate a time for the motion to be considered within 2 legislative days. If a majority approves it, the House then moves to consider the underlying measure. Discharge petitions are rarely successful since a petition brought by a minority party requires members of the majority to buck their party leaders. In recent years, members have tried to use discharge petitions to raise the debt ceiling, increase the federal minimum wage, and address other issues. In 2015, several dozen House Republicans bucked party leaders to join with Democrats, who were in the minority, to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. Before that, a discharge petition hadn't succeeded since 2002. The waiting periods and the fact that garnering enough signatures can take weeks often renders the maneuver futile for time-sensitive legislation, and the discharge petition can only be brought to the House floor on specific days, further complicating its use. House Democrats already have one broadly worded discharge petition that has the support of 212 active members, and party leaders believe they can use that as a shell or vehicle for bringing the foreign aid bill to the floor. So this is written back some time ago, in February, I think, this article. But it would still need sign-on from a handful of House Republicans to reach the 218-member threshold. Getting members of the majority party to sign on remains the biggest hurdle for the discharge petition, according to Matt Glassman, a senior fellow at the Government Affairs Institute at Georgetown University. While there may be a sizable group of Republicans willing to vote for the bill should it come to the floor, they may not be willing to make themselves targets by signing onto a discharge petition. In other words, if it was sent to the floor by Mike Johnson as the majority speaker and said, right, go for it, guys, vote on this, but, Republicans really don't want you to vote on this, people will still feel more able to vote on that bill that is kind of everyone has to kind of vote on, or it's out there to be voted on. Whereas a discharge petition is a kind of like, right, guys, can I get you to sign on to this because we really want to get it to the floor to be voted on. We need enough signatures, and so it's almost like you've got to go as someone who's bucking the trend. You've got to go against your own party's expectations to some degree to add your signature to the petition. So it's a little more risky for the majority party since it's a minority desired bill, effectively. So there is some dynamics to consider there. If 218 people are hell-bent on doing something in the House, they're going to get it done, Glassman says. You can block them, you can slow them down, but they're going to win. But nobody's hell-bent on doing this in the Republican Party. Well, the thing is, I think we've got to a point now where there are some Republicans who are like, holy crap, I really do care about Ukraine. And actually, I can't properly live with myself if this doesn't get through. Like, this is important to me. So anyway, that's your background on a discharge petition. Kyiv Independent and other places are reporting at the moment that US House Democrats have started gathering signatures to force a vote on Ukraine aid. So US House of Representative Democrats began collecting signatures on March 12th, so that's today, to bypass House Speaker Mike Johnson and force a vote on Ukraine aid via a discharge petition, Reuters reported. And indeed, it appears that they have 169 out of 218 or collected already. So, as Noel reports here says, seems like Johnson better save face and bring this up for the vote himself. So that's interesting because he might look at what's going on and go, right, okay, damned if I do, damned if I don't. This is going to be super embarrassing if we get defeated by a discharge petition. So even though there's a group of MAGA Republicans that don't want me to bring this to the floor, I might as well bring it to the floor because it's going to happen anyway. So that, as mentioned, there are so many dynamics to consider here. But what's also interesting is, and again, I need to look into this, but apparently there are 2 active discharge petitions. One is for the existing Senate bill. So that is what Senator passed 70 to 29, which is a pretty decent existing aid package. I mean, it was messed around a little bit with, but basically it's your 60 odd billion dollars worth of aid to Ukraine, not really making any difference between humanitarian aid and military aid. But there's also a Republican-led discharge petition, as far as I can work out. The other, sponsored by a moderate Republican, which is, I think, Brian Fitzpatrick, would mean less funding and no humanitarian aid, and take longer to go through. So, as this person says, I demand a bill rather than no bill, but much prefer the Senate iteration. So, as someone says here, how many Democrat votes are needed? Well, it depends how many Republican votes you can get, but essentially, really, you want every single Democrat vote you can get, because the more Democratic votes you get, the fewer Republican votes you will need. So as long as you get 215, it doesn't really matter where they come from. It'll be interesting to see what appetite there is for this from Republicans. Now, it's long been stated that there really are enough signatures for this. So it's just, I guess, depends upon whether A, that is true, and B, whether they can just physically, practically get those signatures and get it all done in a fairly efficient manner. But to think that 169 signatures have already materialized in less than a day, I think that's probably good news. It's going to be fascinating to see how this develops. And this is so freaking important, because I'm getting quite buoyed. I don't want to be too positive, but there's just been developments over the last week or so in terms of what Europe is doing, what France is doing, what Emmanuel Macron is saying, and he's still saying stuff. And the Prime Minister has just come out in French Parliament saying, you know, Slava Ukraini, and this big speech, and they voted through the bilateral aid agreement. Sorry, not aid, the bilateral security agreement in the French Parliament. It's just got voted through, and that's really good. And there's the 800,000 plus 200,000 artillery shells coming from the Czech Republic. So the US have announced a $300 million aid package, and then Denmark have just kind of almost trolling the US by saying, you think that's good? And they've, I think, just announced a $330 million aid package, military aid package. So there are things that are looking good. There's all the drone attacks on Russia today, and it looks like there are rumors there are going to be big drone attacks tonight. There's the attacks on the northern border into Russia. There's just lots of stuff going on that I think is leaving me in a positive mood with regard to the prognosis for Ukraine going forward. And the only thing that's missing, really the only thing that's missing, is that American military aid package, and they hold so many keys to Ukraine's success here. The fate of Ukraine rests at least somewhat in the hands of the US. I think if the US, if Trump got in and aid didn't come from the US, then I think will be interesting, because the Department of Defense I think you'd have some massive tensions with the Department of Defense and civil servants in the US and the Trump administration. I think that there would be some real internal tensions. And because the experts know what needs to be done, Trump less so. But I do think Europe is recognizing this, and notwithstanding any kind of divisive electoral issues within Europe that where discord's fomented by Russia, and you get some government administration voted in that's not supportive of Ukraine. Other than that eventuality happening, Europe is standing up and is putting their hand up ready to be counted. And I think that's looking much more positive for Ukraine. So it is all about the US aid. And if this works, then we are back on track. Ukraine is back on track in a really big way. You can expect to see munitions flowing through. The American military industrial complex then getting the proper green light. We can see that they are ramping up the production potential in terms of artillery ammunition. And if suddenly that aid package lubricates those cogs, then you are getting a sustainable large amount of ammunition coming through. But then you're thinking ATACMS, 300-kilometer ATACMS. You're thinking, possibly stuff for F-16s. There's so many potentials there. The US are so freaking important to Ukraine's success. So this, to me, is huge news. And that's why I had to speak to you about it and just kind of offload to you. And sorry, there's been so much content today. But I just hope that Republicans, in this case, walk across the aisle. And there is clearly a majority that wants this. The question is there a majority? Is there a sizable proportion of Republican congressional lawmakers who are prepared to do something that they might get ragged on by other MAGA Republicans? Are they happy enough? Are they willing to weather the storm of criticism from some of the base and from some other lawmakers to do what is clearly the right thing, morally, but also strategically, militarily, politically, strategically, geopolitically important for the US? Like, are they willing to make that right decision? And I'm sure there are enough Republicans to do that. Anyway, let me know what you think. That's my offloading. It's been 10 minutes longer than I was expecting it to be. Anyway, till the pit. Speak to you tomorrow.